Welcome to the Daily Memphians Memphis Grizzlies podcast, the first Daily Memphian Grizzlies podcast on video. The people could not get enough of the incredible tones of me and Chris Herrington, and so they needed to see our ugly mugs on camera as well. So from now on, we are going to have the Grizzlies podcast on video. You'll be able to watch it on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And this will be a good, fun change for us, Chris. Your thoughts on being on camera now? What's your experience with camera work, my friend?
I've done a few cable access TV shows and local TV news hits, and did some Channel 3 Knowledge Bowl back in the day in high school. Actually hosted Teen Talk, a couple episodes on cable access in Memphis when I was in high school. So not a lot, but a little bit. But my main reaction to this is looking at you. You are one plan away from like hosting your own like Between Two Ferns kind of situation. So I think, we need to upgrade you to another plan on the other side, and this could be a whole comedy bit.
Yeah, I don't think people can see. I don't know if we can even move the cameras. This is like a total trial run. This is the first time. But I do have a big plant right here. I don't know if I can even grab it and pull it into the shot here. Let's see. Yep, big plant right here. That's bad podcasting if you're just listening and you're not watching. That's why you should be watching. But there it is, the big plant. I am very close to a Between Two Ferns situation here. It's going to be weird having to think about what I'm wearing now. Yeah. I wore a hat in here because I wear a hat like every day of my life. And the first comment from Natalie was like, "You have a big shadow on your face." So that's new. Maybe I need to go get a haircut a little bit more often. I had to turn the hat backwards so that you could even see me. So I don't know. This is going to be an interesting experience for the two of us.
I did throw a collared shirt on at the last minute over my T-shirt, both because it would look better and because we don't do free advertisements, because I'm wearing a barbecue shop T-shirt. Not a sponsor, but hey, Eric Vernon at a barbecue shop. If you want a sponsor, give us a call.
Yeah, that would be great sponsor. I would be in favor. Okay, I guess we have to talk Grizzlies. We can't just talk about ourselves for the entire podcast. I want to start with the news of the week, I think, when it comes to the Memphis Grizzlies, which is these new lottery proposal rules, or the extra details added into the new proposed lottery rules. It's a difficult thing to explain, in part because it just is so complicated, and right. I've been explaining it all week long. Do you want to take your turn, or do you want me to just go one more time?
Well, so the lottery reform proposal that's been leaked out many times and is finally going to be voted on Thursday has one fundamental component. It has some side components. The fundamental component, some people may not like it, but it hasn't been all that controversial and seems like it's full speed ahead. And that is expanding the lottery to more teams, flattening the odds. We don't need to get to the nuts and bolts of that, but that essentially should end tanking for the most part. And that everyone seems to be sort of on board with that in the league. The NBA, the commissioner's office, Adam Silver specifically, has added some extra stuff that I personally don't think needs to be there. And that is a couple of rules around restricting consecutive picks. And so they've got a rule that is meant to bar teams from having back-to-back number one overall picks. And then a second rule, and this is the one that could apply to the Grizzlies, that would bar teams, in theory, ostensibly, not really, bar teams from having 3 consecutive top 5 picks, right? And so everyone keeps saying this is a rule to keep teams from having 3 consecutive top 5 picks. The problem is that it's not. It doesn't do that. And as you apply it specifically to the Grizzlies, what's happening here is the rule is applying to where picks come from, not where they end up. And so the Utah Jazz is the only team that's been in the top 5 of the past 2 lotteries. They were the number 5th pick in 2025, and now they have the 2nd pick in this draft, 2026. And so if you apply this, no, you can't have 3 straight 5 picks, and you apply it starting now, and you apply it to where picks are coming from, the only team that applies to is the Utah Jazz. Well, the problem there is that, one of the problems, is that the Jazz don't have their pick. their pick has already been traded, and it's been traded potentially to the Memphis Grizzlies. In the Jaren Jackson Jr. trade, the Grizzlies get the best of either the Utah, the Cleveland, or the Minnesota pick. So under this rule, as seems that's been proposed reportedly, and we both know this to be true, if the Utah Jazz pick was drawn in the top 5, that would be considered a third straight top 5 pick, even though the Jazz wouldn't be getting the pick. And thus, it wouldn't be allowed to be a top 5 pick that Memphis would get. In that situation, it would be immediately pushed down to number 6. So that is the problem here. A rule that ostensibly is meant to keep a team from getting 3 straight top 5 picks, inspired presumably by the San Antonio Spurs getting 3 straight top 5 picks, with Victor Wembanyama, Stephon Castle, and Dylan Harper, would in this instance keep the Grizzlies from getting a second straight top 5 pick, which is not the spirit of the rule. It's not the intent of the rule at all. It doesn't make sense. The problem, if you string it out, is that it would actually prevent the Utah Jazz, in theory, from getting 3 straight top 5 picks. They could trade. Let's make up a trade. They could trade Lauri Markkanen to the Sacramento Kings for the Sacramento Kings unprotected 2027 pick. That pick could be the first pick in the draft, and they would be allowed to keep it. So the NBA has created a rule, in theory, designed to prevent teams from having top 5 picks that does not do that, and that could keep the Grizzlies from having 2 top 5 picks in a row. So I don't think they need to be doing any of this stuff at all. I think this is Adam Silver adding unnecessary complication, but the unnecessary complication he's added does not do what the rule is meant to do. It does not do it.
There's a reason that they believe that they needed to apply it to picks that have been traded. And that's because there would be this loophole that would exist where, let's say, 2 teams finish 4 through 10 in the standings. They have equal chance at getting a top 5 pick, and they both are facing a restriction. They could just swap picks with each other. Boom. All of a sudden, you no longer have to worry about having some sort of restriction on it. But not if you apply and I'm not saying they should do this because I don't think they should, but not if you apply the restriction to the possession of the pick. That's what they should do.
That would eliminate that loophole. I actually don't think that's what they should do. I think they shouldn't do any of this at all. I think they should stick to the flatter odds and the longer lottery and not have these consecutive pick restrictions. I think it would make more sense. It would follow the logic if they applied it to possession, which means you're not allowed to have a third consecutive top 5 or a second consecutive number 1 pick at the time of the lottery drawing. When the lottery is drawn and the draft is set, that is what is determined. And so if you did it that way, the restriction would apply to Utah. Utah would not, under any circumstance, be allowed to possess a top 5 pick because they've had 2 in the last 2 years. It would not apply to Memphis because they wouldn't meet that criteria. And so if they wanted to follow the logic of their own goal, they would apply it to possession of the pick, not to where the pick is coming from. But even if they did that, it creates all kinds of other problems. Now you're in a situation where if you're Utah and you still have your pick, let's say you haven't traded it in the Jaren deal, you still have your pick, and you know it can't be a top 5 pick now because you've had 2 in a row, that incentivizes you to try to trade that pick. If you're a team, and this would apply to the Grizzlies, if you're a team that's traded for multiple future picks, including multiple picks in the same draft, they have 3 in the 2027 draft, that's a restriction on you on what you can do with those picks that you've traded for. This is Adam Silver. He is incapable of doing less. He's trying to fix a problem that has already mostly been fixed by the core of the lottery reform, and he's chasing sort of bad PR. Like, it's a bad precedent that this got these 3 top 5 picks, or it's a bad precedent that Cleveland a decade ago or 20 years ago got back-to-back number 1 picks. So let's create this rule to keep that from happening, and then it creates all these additional problems. And so I think this is Adam Silver has twisted himself into this illogical pretzel that is now going to probably lead to a bad rule that doesn't need to be there. And it's unlikely that bad rule will impact the Grizzlies, but it could. And the fact that it could is enough.
When I say that's what they should do in applying it to possession, I mean that's what they should do if this is indeed really what they're shooting for. And
that's right.
You know,
100%.
If they really think that there is value in trying to assure that the same team is not going to have a top 5 pick 3 years in a row, and that's what's important to them, then that's the way that they should should make the rule. If not,
it's simple. If you want that to be the rule, make that the rule.
Right.
I don't know why they didn't do that.
It doesn't make any sense. And so there's that part of it. And then there's the part of it where there's two other elements to this that I think matter in this situation. There is the element of how we got here, the how we got here part of this, which is there was too much blatant tanking in the NBA over this last season to where the problem became so apparent and it was such a public black eye for the league that they're feeling forced to do something in this situation. Well, that was forced because there were teams trying to manufacture their own lottery luck through losing. This rule does not this rule doesn't address teams trying to manufacture their own lottery luck. This addresses teams that just might get too lucky. And it diminishes a transaction that has already happened. The league isn't aiming to try to punish teams for thinking about their future by trading for future first-round picks. That's not the spirit of what happened here. So it doesn't necessarily apply, and that's why I think it's so dumb, frankly, and I wrote a column about it. You can go read it over at the Daily Memphian. The other part of this is that if you just think about it logically, there is self-interest involved on behalf of every other team in the league.
Right.
So how are the Grizzlies going to get other owners to vote to do for any sort of solution here that doesn't result in the Grizzlies end up getting punished for something that they didn't create here in being restricted to the top 5 potentially with the Jazz pick next year? Because if the Grizzlies can't pick in the top 5, guess what? That means all other 15 teams that are going to be in this lottery proposal are now suddenly going to have a better chance of picking in the top 5. It's dumb.
Just to put a finer point on that, because I think some people will get confused by that. It's not that the Grizzlies can't pick in the top 5. It's that they can't pick in the top 5 with a Utah pick.
Utah pick. Right.
They could with a Cleveland or Minnesota pick if those teams, fall apart and end up being worse.
Or their own.
And it's also not their own. And it's also not that they wouldn't get the Utah pick. It's that they wouldn't get it in the top 5. It would be pushed to 6. And it's not that the pick would disappear. And so there's a limit to how bad it could be. And it's unlikely it will be anything. But the mere fact that it could, there's a theoretical construct where it could deprive the Grizzlies of the number 1 overall pick. The fact that could be allowed to happen for a rule in a way that would not violate the spirit of the rule, it just shouldn't get to this point. But the point you made about self-interest, this is another sort of dark humor part of this. All of this is happening because teams violated the spirit of the game and their own self-interest via tanking, right? Teams made that choice. They made that choice because it was in their self-interest, but they also chose to damage the game in doing so, right? And so these rule changes are because of that. Well, the reason this illogical rule might pass on Thursday is for the same reason. Teams are going to vote for this, even though they know it's illogical and they know it's wrong, because it kind of helps me a little bit, so I'll vote for it. And so you're trying to stop teams from damaging the game in their own self-interest. Now you're giving them this rule that they're going to vote for to damage the game in their own self-interest. I mean, I'm just so over the Adam Silver stuff is just driving me crazy at this point.
Yeah. Well, the other part of this too is that, I've heard a lot of I'm not going to be outraged about this until it actually passes because surely this is so illogical that something will be done and they'll fix it. If you made me guess based on everything we just outlined, I think it'll pass.
I do too.
Think? Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I mean, it seems like the train is left the station, and the only team that really sees it as a problem that hurts me is the Memphis Grizzlies, even though there are some other teams that be careful what you wish for. The other thing is that this is only a 3-year thing and they're going to revisit it. And so the down the road implications, teams will just say we'll fix this before it hurts us. Let it hurt them and we'll fix it before it hurts us and let's just move ahead.
Well, that's the other thing that is that sunset provision that exists, which essentially is going to just reset these rules 3 years down the line. And so it's not going to matter because ultimately what's going to end up happening is that, they're going to set these rules. The Grizzlies, if voted through, are going to be impacted by these rules, and they're going to be temporary. And then they're going to do a revisit and Memphis may be the only team this ever applies to. It's likely that could happen. And the last thing before we move on, can you imagine just how frustrating it would be for Grizzlies fans if somehow the Cavs fall apart or Minnesota falls apart and Utah is a play-in team and you have not only their potential picks to be in the top 5, but your own potential pick that could be in the top 5, and you got 3 chances in this flattened lottery, and it turns up that Utah is the pick that ends up in the top 5. That's the disaster scenario that's possible.
Well, can you imagine the Utah pick gets pulled number 1, and because of this rule, it gets slotted at 6, and the Grizzlies it would not be a third straight top 5 pick for them. It'd only be a second straight they're being deprived of, and also it's a franchise that has never had the number 1 pick ever. Like it could be taken away from them by this stupid rule. That could happen.
I also just keep thinking of like other parts of this because it's so dumb. But I've heard some people say, well, the Grizzlies shouldn't be complaining about this anyways because they're flattening the lottery odds, which means that if Utah ends up, in the bottom 4 through 10 or whatever, all this is going to mean is that the Grizzlies actually are probably going to end up having a better chance at being towards the top of the draft than they would otherwise. Well, guess what? Everyone else's odds are improving too, so that doesn't matter.
Well, I've gotten some of this pushback from somebody on social media that I was sort of getting tired of because it was so uncomprehending. It suggests that there's 2 alternatives: the previous system, and then this new system with this bad wrinkle in it. That doesn't have to be the choice. It could be the new system without the bad wrinkle in it. Like this interpretation of the 3-pick rule is not intrinsic to the rest of the lottery reform at all. Like it was, the Grizzlies certainly didn't think it was going to be interpreted that way. And the Grizzlies, I think, have been supportive. I mean, they haven't said anything publicly, but I think they've been supportive generally of the lottery reform.
Okay, onward to our next topic. I wrote another column over at the Daily Memphian that published over the weekend. It was a pretty long, extensive piece about Cameron Boozer, Darren Peterson, and Caleb Wilson. And essentially, it just had a numbers breakdown from every angle of the game on all 3 players. And I thought, if you read through the piece, it kind of outlines how Cameron Boozer can be a little bit of a statistical anomaly when it comes to these players, and the impact stats really showed. The passing and creation really shows through the numbers. And then it also included like a different sort of way that Draft Baller, which we've referenced 100 times, it feels like already on this podcast, does player comparisons and essentially outlined the NBA outcomes based on these player comparisons that are uniquely done, where it doesn't only just pair like the player's height, weight, and regular stats, but also their playing style and the type of actions that they play in and that sort of thing. And basically the outcome comes out to, Peterson probably has the most, when compared to players of his nature, has the best chance of becoming a star player. Boozer behind that, Wilson slightly behind that. How do you think that aligns with the way you're thinking right now about those 3 players in terms of who has the highest upside? Who do you think is most likely to be a star player in the NBA?
I think, the statistical stuff is a little complicated because you're dealing with a partial season with Caleb Wilson. Mostly a full season, but he missed some time. So the sample size gets smaller with him. And then the Darren Peterson stuff was such a mess at Kansas. And so how much do you believe the statistical profile in college, like, is an accurate reflection of what he is as a player? That's why you got to take that stuff and combine it with watching games, with looking at the track record before, with, all information matters, right? It all flows in and you have to process it. To me, one of the things that's persuasive in the comparison, 3-way comparison, is the idea of the passing playmaking, which Boozer has demonstrated at a very high level. Peterson has not, if you're just going by the college numbers, but there's the sense that is there, that is a component of his game. And then with Wilson, it's mostly sort of not there. There's a little bit of that, like, it's not terrible, but you look at the numbers and you watch him play. He is a play finisher now. Like they did some sort of high-low stuff with him and Henry Vasar at Carolina that looked pretty good, but it felt like more like structured play. It didn't feel like he was a guy who like you're going to run offense through. And when I think about just upside generally, like if you just ignore the rest of your team, which it's, to some degree you should, you're trying to get a tentpole player. When you think about upside generally, I think the ability to be a high usage guy, to be a hub of offense that's both a scorer and playmaker is pretty important. And then if you think about the Grizzlies team makeup specifically with where you're hoping Zach Edey is a cornerstone, and then you got Cedric Coward there who might grow as a playmaker but isn't really there yet. Edey's sort of a non-passer, and Coward is a guy who's we don't know how he's going to grow as a playmaker. I think there's a real need if you're adding a player you think is going to be your best player, but at minimum going to be one of your top three with Edey and Coward. I think the playmaking component's really important. And the more you sort of hinted in that direction in what you wrote. And the more I've looked at Wilson, as much as I like Wilson, the quote he gave you at the combine, me and Edey together, there's going to be a lot of dunking. Yeah, but there's only so much space in the paint, right? And so the idea of having two guys who need to be set up for the most part, do most of their work at the rim, I think that creates some functional problems. And the upside to me is trying to find a guy who can run offense through. He can be a primary playmaker, even if he's not a point guard. And the fact that Boozer has demonstrated that, and Peterson, if he hasn't totally demonstrated it at the college level, seems to have the skill set to be the kind of two guard who you can run a lot from. To me, that gives both those guys a pretty clear edge over Wilson to me. There are other factors too, but that's the one that really jumps out to me is that passing creation aspect.
Boozer checks every box. Like he checks all of them. And I think the only thing that's maybe a slight knock is the athleticism, but it's very clear that if you just go look at his track record, and I mean, he's won Peach Jam multiple times, won gold medals for the USA, 16 and under team and 17 and under team. And he's been successful National Player of the Year at Duke. Like he's been successful at every single level, but it is clear that some of it is just like the physical advantages that he's had at every stage so far that he won't quite have in the NBA, but it's just so fundamentally sound that like it's hard to imagine that like a lack of athleticism is going to be what stops him, for me, from being an excellent NBA player, because there are plenty of NBA players that turn out to be awesome that aren't like explosive athletes. I don't think Luka's really an explosive athlete. I don't think Jokic is an explosive athlete. Şengün's not really an explosive athlete. They're all really good NBA players and all-stars.
Right.
And so the question is whether you think all that other stuff is going to translate, the passing, the creation, just the way that he's able to get his shots off. And I think it's fair to ask questions about that and say, hey, look, maybe Caleb Wilson has a higher ceiling because he is the more explosive athlete of the two. I think that certainly makes a ton of sense. But then at some point, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to say, these numbers are not correct. These numbers that we're looking at here with these two players are not going to fully translate for Cameron Boozer, and they will for a player like Caleb Wilson. His numbers are going to get better, and we think Boozer's going to go the other way. Because if you look through the piece, like every aspect of the game, pretty much, except for maybe pure defensive stat creation, Boozer has an edge over Wilson.
Yeah, I have a sort of a double, and I really like Wilson, but I have sort of a growing double concern with him. And one aspect of that's the passing playmaking that we just talked about, and there's also the shooting. He was a sort of a non-shooter outside from 3-point range in college. The mid-range, there was some interesting mid-range stuff there, but it was more like a post up, turn and face kind of thing. I think especially with Edey as your center, you need to be able to function on the perimeter and half-court offense, which means you either need to be a shooter or a good passer or ball handler playmaker. And I just don't know if he has either, or if he's going to have either to the level that you really need to top out his potential, whereas I think Booster has both. I I think I've gotten in on Boozer because I think his game is going to change at the NBA level. I think he's going to be more of a perimeter oriented player than people think. If you believed he was a strictly power player 4 or 5, I would have more concerns about Boozer, because I do think you watch him in college, you'll see him getting a shot blocked a lot, and you'll see him not blocking anybody else's shot, right? So the idea of him playing as more of a pure paint-based power player in the NBA, I do think is problematic. But I just don't think that's what he's going to be. I think he's going to slim down. I think his game is going to drift to be more of a point forward. And I think the passing and the shooting and the feel is really what's going to elevate. And he's going to be more of like, to me, he has a chance to be a much better version, a much more skilled, like, pure passer shooter version of like a Paolo Banchero kind of player. More of a face-up forward you're running offense through than a guy who's gonna man the paint. So I do think there are real deficiencies in his game in terms of like at the rim stuff, as both as a finisher and as a defender. But I just don't think that stuff's going to matter as much, because I don't think that's how he's going to be used.
One thing I brought up was that it feels like most people who are national NBA media members or follow the Grizzlies closely would tell you that the Grizzlies more typically draft off the model than other teams. They like the players that are analytically gifted, that have good impact stats and efficient, basketball history. And I think that is partially true. It doesn't mean that they haven't taken chances on players, because they have. If that's the route they're going to go, then Boozer would be the clear fit. Of the two options between him and Wilson. I think Peterson's a little bit of a different story, given what he dealt with in Kansas and how he was kind of in and out of the lineup. I think when he was in fully, the numbers are really good. But would you agree that Boozer would be, if we're going to go based on Grizzlies draft history, Boozer would seem to be the most likely pick? And do you think that they'll have a similar approach here, or do you think that they will have a different approach here? And one more thing I should just add is, like, all these players are going to be efficient and good at this level of the draft.
Yeah.
So maybe it doesn't quite matter, but Boozer is the outlier, right? He's the outlier in this situation.
Yeah, I tend to think that stuff gets overstated a little bit. Like it's not 2005 anymore. I think every team is looking at everything. If every team is looking at data of all kinds, stats and biometric data and all kinds of tracking data, and I think every team is also watching film, and every team is going to games, and every team is interviewing players, and it's just a matter of sort of how you process the information. Maybe there are a couple of front offices left in the league who are still haven't caught up. I could name a couple of teams. Maybe there are a couple out there, but I think at this point it's a little bit more of a level playing field in terms of like every team has like a VP of strategy, basically. Like Grizzlies aren't alone in that regard. And I think at this level of the draft, the prospects are the prospects are so good and so proven in different ways that I certainly think it might be the case that the Grizzlies prefer Boozer, not just to Wilson, but maybe over a couple of the other guys. I think there are probably multiple teams who feel that way, but I don't think a lot of people just made this assumption. Oh, the Grizzlies love the analytics. Always love that it's the analytics, like the Ohio State University. The Grizzlies love the analytics, and Boozer's the analytics guy, and so that's who they like. I don't know that that's who they like. I don't know that they would take him over Debanza or Peterson.
Yeah, well, there is the other element of this, which is that they have surprised before. So I don't think you can rule anything out when it comes to who's on the table here for the Grizzlies at number 3. I just think Boozer has been the better player of the freshman class for years on years to this point. Which we underlined, and I don't know. He feels the safest to me. He feels the safest.
To me, the real wild card here is Peterson in multiple ways. How comfortable are teams going to get by draft day with Peterson given? My understanding is that the medical records from the combine maybe have just recently gone out. Like, I don't think that was all available at the combine. So I'm sure all teams are poring over that. They're looking into the cramping thing and the creatine thing and all the rest. And how comfortable are teams going to get? The Grizzlies need Peterson to be considered the elite prospect he was supposed to be, either, to create the value up top to push value down to them, or because maybe that's the guy they're looking at, right? And so is Peterson going to be considered, a number one overall caliber player by Washington, by Utah, by Memphis? If so, then that creates more value for the Grizzlies. And then it gives them a better sense. Like if Boozer does go top 2 and Peterson gets pushed down, it's Peterson versus Wilson, an easy choice. Like, is that a choice they end up facing? So I think the Peterson thing is a real wild card here. Not only how the Grizzlies are going to feel about him, but how Utah and Washington are going to feel about him. Because you want this to be a draft where it really is 3 guys who are worthy of the number 1 pick, because that means you get one of them.
Go read the column over at the Daily Memphian if you want to look through the numbers. There's some interactive graphs on there, especially if you go to the story on your desktop. So go check that out. It'll get you prepared for the debate that will continue, I'm sure, for the next month on the Boozer and Wilson front. Chris, you also wrote something over the Daily Memphian. You've had a couple of different mailbags. I think we addressed the last one on the last pod, so let's do the most recent one this pod and go a little further on a couple topics that I wanted to ask you about. There's 2 in particular. One was the hope that Ja Morant's going to return positive value on the trade market this offseason. Do you think there's more of a chance that Ja has positive trade return now than when they last visited this at the trade deadline?
Oh, well, there's certainly more of a chance because we know that he did not have positive value at the trade deadline. So, there's nowhere to go but up as far as that was concerned. That got tested. If he had positive trade value at the trade deadline, he would have been traded. This is something that I think there's a segment of the fan base that just is not going to accept this until it happens. We were there. Some of these were in response to our questions. Not only did they make it publicly known they were trying to trade Ja Morant, but when they didn't trade him, Zach Kleiman sat at a table and said, we are pivoting to a younger build. This is not about Ja. It's about franchise direction. We are pivoting to a younger build. We turned the page as much as we could at this trade deadline. There's not mystery here about what the Grizzlies want to do. They want to move Ja Morant, and they want to fully pivot into this younger build. And so they're clearly going to try to move him again this summer. They have shown that they're willing to say no if it's not good enough, or if it flips to the negative. So we'll see. I think it's likely they'll find a way to move Morant in a way that they find brings back some level of value to them. But I think it's not what a lot of fans still think. I've seen people on social media like Ja in the 16, or maybe you can move up to the 7. That's not where it's at. That's not where it's at. Maybe you leverage your way into getting a smaller draft asset return. Maybe you leverage your way into getting a player you think could fit in your rotation, even if not a star or even a starter. Maybe and this is most likely, maybe it's a very complicated, financially driven situation. And it's about being willing to take back some money in exchange for some assets, and Ja going out in the deal helps those assets be a little bit better than they would be otherwise. I'll get into detail in the coming weeks about some potential kind of, trade ideas. But I think people who are thinking like there's some big return coming back for Morant on the trade market, I just don't think that's going to be the case.
Let me ask you a couple would you do it trade questions. Would you just do it for expiring contracts back right now?
If I explored the other options and I didn't think something else better was available, yes, I would, because I think they need to move forward. I think getting the 3rd overall pick really helps them do that. They're going to put a centerpiece player down with Cedric Howard and Zach Edey and be ready to move forward. And they're probably not going to be a playoff team next season. Whatever the best they're going to be is not going to happen this season. But getting that 3rd pick now gives you a clear path forward. It doesn't feel like you're going to be in the wilderness forever as long as that player hits. And so I think it's in their best interest to finish turning that page, to use Zach Kleiman's metaphor. Yeah.
Would you do it for contracts back, matching contracts that, may not be expiring this season, plus like a late 1st or early 2nd draft asset.
Yeah, maybe. I think the financial stuff, and I wrote a little bit about this more broadly in the mailbag, and I'll revisit this again in the near future. The financial stuff is interesting because you have to project it out over multiple seasons. The Grizzlies are not going to be, I don't believe, a cap space team this summer where they're trying to go out and sign free agents for more than a mid-level exception. They could be that in 2027. And so how much do you want to keep the door open to be a free agency player in 2027? Does that color what kind of contracts you're willing to take back, not just in a Ja deal, but with that Jaren Jackson trade exception? I think they are in position, especially in the short term, to take back more bad money. I think they could take back $30-40 million of additional bad money for this season if it gets them assets, draft picks, and stuff like that. The question is, how much money are they willing to take on beyond this current season? Now, the Morant contract itself is $45 million, right? And so if you're moving that, I mean, you know, you could take back a little bit more than that, and it still leaves you in decent position. But I do think the 2027 summer and where they want to be cap-wise with that is going to could color what they're willing to do, both with the John Morant trade and with other trades.
Well, you hinted at the other mailbag topic that I wanted to bring up, which was how the Grizzlies will use this trade exception that they created in the Jaren Jackson Jr. trade. You kind of outlined two different scenarios. One, you bring in a player of use into the trade exception, or the other, you bring in a contract and you get paid to do so, an unwanted contract from another team, and you get paid to do so via draft assets. Have you looked at that at all? Like, in relation to this draft, to say, hey, like maybe the Warriors need to clear money, and so they would give up a Moses Moody contract and give the Grizzlies a pick to do so. I don't know. Like, I'm just making up a scenario.
Well, that's exactly what happened the last time there was one of these, where the Grizzlies created a trade exception, a big trade exception in the Mike Conley trade, and then literally used it to take a contract from Golden State because they needed to clear money to do something else, right? It was Andre Iguodala. They got a first-round pick for that. I think, you know, look around at some of the other big moves that are going to happen this summer, like a Giannis trade is the biggest. The contracts are so big on some of these moves that it may be that some teams that get involved may need to clear salary to help facilitate other deals they want to do. And so you look at the teams that could be involved in big trades or have a lot of salary already. You know, Milwaukee is, you know, you're talking about the team that's sending out Giannis. Did they need to, for some reason, you know, get rid of a Kyle Kuzma, who's on a $22 million expiring contract? Did they need to clear that money to make a deal happen? Because that would fit into the Grizzlies trade exception. Moses Moody, you mentioned, is one that would fit into a Grizzlies trade exception. You know, Max Strus of Cleveland. Cleveland's in the second apron already. If they're trying to make moves and shake up their team, they're restricted from doing things because they're in the second apron. Do they need to clear money to help give them flexibility? You know, could you get Max Strus and their pick, which is like, I don't know, 27 or 28 or whatever, to take that money? An obvious one, and it's a big contract, is Jakob Poeltl from Toronto, who would fit into the trade exception. He's got 4 years left on that deal. How much do you have to get paid to take that contract? I mean, that's a player who would actually help you as a backup center, but he's so overpaid for so long. I don't think you do that to get the 20th pick from Toronto. But these are the kind of things that you might be looked to do with that trade exception. Take back a contract for a team that's trying to shed money and get paid to do it. I think that is more likely than just like taking back some player you love. Now, I think your hope would be like maybe you do both, right? You take back a player that's on a bad contract, but he can still play and help you, and you get paid to do it. You know, that'd be nice.
Anything else from the mailbag that we didn't touch on that you would want to talk more about? Those were the two that I highlighted.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote that like 5 days ago, which feels like 3 months. So I don't even remember what's in it anymore.
I understand. I get that. I feel like I've been writing about these NBA proposed rules for like 3 months, and it's been like 3 days. Okay, onward to the NBA playoffs. We had a sweep in the Eastern Conference. The Knicks take down the Cleveland Cavaliers. New York City is going absolutely nuts. I gotta admit, I love the entertainment factor of Knicks fans after they win these games. Like, I rush to go see the videos of them celebrating on the streets of New York City on 7th Avenue and wherever else they are. And, you know, I think they're a team that it's relatively easy to be happy for, given that they haven't been to the finals since 1999. And I probably would have told you going into this series, Eastern Conference Finals series, that I didn't think that the Knicks would have much of a chance against the Spurs or the Thunder. They're playing so well right now that it's hard to discredit them. And I do think that the Thunder would be a little bit more of a difficult matchup for New York because they wouldn't really be able to hide Brunson very well. But I think if it were the Spurs, I would give the Knicks a pretty good chance, to be honest with you.
Well, I mean, the Spurs are the younger team. They haven't been there before. There's that aspect of it. I think the Knicks not only making the finals, but making the finals in the way they did with this real run that they're on has done a lot of good for interest in the NBA finals. We'll see what happens when the games start, right? But it really feels like a real series now, and an interesting series no matter who it is, because you have the aura of New York and Madison Square Garden and all of that. And because this Knicks team doesn't feel like a team you could just dismiss out of hand because they're from the East, right? I mean, they're really in a groove. They have multiple all NBA caliber players on their roster. They're all healthy. They're all playing well and playing together. And you got, the Spurs who haven't been there before, and you got the Thunder team that's banged up without two key players, and AJ Mitchell and Jalen Williams. And it feels like there's a real series waiting in New York when it gets there. And so I think it's been very good for the playoffs and for the league and for interest in the NBA finals.
The Knicks have an interesting roster construction sort of tactic because they have this dynamic guard in Brunson who's like been the ultimate closer for them in the big moments. And then they just have a bunch of big wings that they can throw at you in addition to Cat. And so I do wonder how that, I think they would match up pretty well, as I mentioned earlier, with San Antonio because they would have the big wings to throw at the guards, at Fox and at Champagny and at Castle. They would have, a lot of those guys. And I don't know if San Antonio would always would try to hurt them with Wemby because that's what they do. And I don't know if the Knicks have a great answer for him, but I think they have the advantage almost everywhere else. And so I think that they match up well with them.
And and the Spurs are down 3-2, so it maybe doesn't get to this point, but how do the Spurs deal with Towns, right? Because if you put Wemby on him, he's going to draw Wemby away from the basket. You want Wemby protecting the paint. And then if you put Champagny on him, like Towns is kind of a matchup problem if he's in a groove in that way too. And so I think that'd be an interesting series. I'm still rooting for the Spurs to get out of that Spurs OKC. It's not feeling great, but hey, 6 in San Antonio should be a good one.
Yeah. So I watched, Game 5 last night, Spurs and Thunder, and it felt to me like that was the game in particular where the Thunder's maturity kind of showed because the Spurs shot selection was really questionable through a lot of that game. I found myself asking the television multiple times, what is Wembanyama doing? Like, I was doing the Jaren Jackson Jr. thing that fans have done for years where it's like, get in the paint, dude. Like, get closer to the basket. That's what I was doing, except for Victor Wembanyama last night. And so, I think that series is over. I think the Thunder are going to win now. And I just don't see a scenario where the Spurs are going to beat them 2 times in a row, especially in OKC. And thinking back to Game 1 and what I underlined on the podcast about how it felt like the Spurs needed the perfect storm to win the game, and they needed that Victor Wembanyama, Steph Curry 3-pointer. And so I've lost hope in the Spurs. I think this thing's over. What do you think? I have a hard time seeing them win a Game 7 in OKC. So I agree ultimately, but I think they can push it to a Game 7. I think coming back to San Antonio, I'm expecting a big effort out of the Spurs. I'll be disappointed if we don't get a big effort out of the Spurs, unlike the elimination game at home Cleveland Cavaliers we saw. That was like the last game, Game 5, was like the perfect OKC game because you had the dudes who come off the bench and all of a sudden become Kobe Bryant for them. Like, it feels like that happens every other game, that the Thunder just have some random role player go off. It was Wallace, who was like a plus 27 last night, and Caruso hitting threes again. And then you had them forcing getting the 20-plus points off of turnovers, which is what the Thunder does. SGA going 16 for 17 from the free throw line. It was the perfect storm for OKC last night. Like they're just not going to lose games when they play like that, and that's the way the game is officiated, and that's the way that it goes. So we'll see what happens in the last two games, but it feels unlikely. All right, before we get out of here, the first podcast on video. Some hiccups. We're working through it. We might have a little bit of a crackling on the audio, so we apologize for that. But we're gonna fix it. This was the trial run. It'll be better. We'll be better the next time. That's what we're aiming for. Improvement. We take things day by day. As the Memphis Grizzlies would say. So we'll try to get that worked out. But there's more to life than basketball. Chris, what were you doing this week?
I've been cooking, man. I've been cooking up a storm. On Saturday, I made a big batch of Indian food for the family. Made butter chicken, red lentils, spinach and potato, tomato chutney. And then on Memorial Day, we had friends over, and I did braised beef short ribs with cheddar grits. And I made a strawberry rhubarb crisp using my backyard rhubarb. So I've been cooking up a storm.
Good for you. And the crazy thing is, I swear, I was planning to come in here and say the same exact thing. I have been cooking. In fact, I've been grilling. That's what I've been doing for the most part. So my wife and kid went out of town for the weekend. So I was home alone. I was, Kevin McAllister for the weekend. It was pretty glorious. I'm not going to lie. My house was quiet for the first time in 6 months. So I did enjoy that. And I just used it as an opportunity to chef up for myself every single day. Made ribs on the grill with the specific homemade rub. Did that. Cooked myself a filet. And then also did some lemon pepper chicken wings. I had a feast this weekend for myself. That was fun. And I went and saw a movie by myself.
Did you invite Giannis over?
I did not.
For those lemon pepper wings?
I did not.
Okay.
I did see the commercial about 5 times though.
Or Blake Griffin? Yeah, Blake Griffin. He'd come over, have some lemon pepper wings with you.
Yeah. And I went and saw a movie by myself. I went and saw Mandalorian and Grogu.
Okay. I saw I Love Boosters.
How was that? I thought about that one.
And Obsession. I Love Boosters is messy. I'm a fan of Boots Riley, the guy who made it. He's a rapper, musician. I'm more of a fan of his music. I wish his movies were a little bit more down to earth like his music is. It gets a little out of control, but I liked a lot of it. Obsession, I've also seen. It's pretty good. That's a hit.
Okay. I was thinking about those options. I did watch the first season of Mandalorian and Grogu on Disney Plus, and so I had some interest, and then I was trying to decide what I was going to do, and that happened to be like the first movie up in the window I was trying to get out to go see a movie. So I just went ahead and did it, went by myself. Going to the movies.
So how was it?
It was fine. I thought it was fine. It's not like a classic Star Wars movie. Like, it's one of the spin-off Star Wars movies. I would just say I'm really glad that I looked up like what happened in the Mandalorian and Grogu show, and I spoiled it for myself before I went to see the movie, because I felt like if I hadn't have done that, I wouldn't have quite liked it as much or understood it as much. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm glad that I spoiled it for myself. So if you're going to go see it and you haven't watched the show, either watch the show or spoil it for yourself is what I'm saying. But it was fine. I like the score. Like the music, like the sounds in the background was great. But it does not, if you're looking for a classic Star Wars movie experience, it's not going to give you that vibe. So it was good enough to go watch by myself and be entertained, though. That's what I would say. All right, well, that'll do it for us this week. We will be back next week, back on video. Hopefully we'll have everything sort of ironed out here. Maybe I can pull the plant a little bit closer to me so we can have some greenery in the background next time. If you're listening to this pod, go watch the videos now, because now we're on camera. It'll be an experience. I'm sure me and Chris are going to have to expand our wardrobes a little bit because we can't be looking like slobs anymore. But we'll be back Thanks for listening. Go read our stuff over at the Daily Memphian and check out all the Daily Memphian's other podcasts. We're out of here.